Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another episode of the Influence Continuum. And today, for my guest, I have someone dear to my heart and someone who works with freedom of mind to help us do all the good stuff that we do. Spike Robinson, thank you for agreeing to do this fun, I think, fun interview. And I'll just read a little bit about you, Spike, if you don't mind. You began your educational career in literary criticism before switching fields to study music theory and composition. And then shortly after completing your master's degree, you became involved with a narcissistic person and was his first recruit into what would grow into a small but very abusive Crowleyan ritual magic cult, magic with MAGICK cult, which we'll get into in a little more. And, when you first exited, you realized the only help was reading Margaret Singer's book, Cults in Our Myths, and my book, Combating Cult Mind Control, and hanging out with ex-Scientologists that you met on the alt-religion Scientology message boards of the early internet. And Spike, you dove into the study of cults wholeheartedly and found a new life path, educating others about coercive control, manipulative persuasion, and the many nefarious ways predatory people fool us into acting against our own best interests. You also manage the YouTube channel of my dear colleague and friend John Atack, ex-Scientologist extraordinaire, but also an expert in undue influence. And Spike, you live with your forever patient husband and two parakeets that love to make noise when they hear my voice, apparently.
hmm
And here's the topic. In your bio, you say you're a lifelong Trekkie and have memorized the plot line of every episode of the original series, as well as most of Next Generation and Voyager. So for this interview, I thought it would be fun because we got to talking about Trekkies, and I grew up on the original Star Trek, watched everything, and did the four finger salute of Spock and all that, which is from Judaism, by the way. Um, and told you my story about the Borg, and you were like, "What? That's really interesting and cool." And so let me start by telling my backstory to the creation of the Borg, and then we'll get into your analysis applying my bite model of authoritarian control to the Borg, a fictional race of cyborgs, and you'll tell us all about that in a minute. So let me just say that I wrote Combating Cult Mind Control. It came out in 1988. And I think it was about 1989 or so, or 90, that I was contacted by Michael Piller, who was the showrunner and major person, one of the major people with Next Generation of Star Trek. And he had read Combating Cult Mind Control, and we talked at length. Um, and he actually suggested he do a fictional TV series based on my story as a former cult leader who nearly died in a van crash and spent his life rescuing people. And stupidly, when he offered me 5% of a TV series, I said no. And, it's one of those things you go look back on and you go, what was I thinking? And why didn't I get advice and whatever? Because he was a great guy. He really loved my work and invited me to the Paramount Studios and gave me a personal tour. And I got to meet Patrick Stewart in outfit as Captain Picard. And and Brent Spiner Data was there, and they were goofing on Brent that I was his replacement actor, and at first he thought it was serious. It was just a wonderful experience for me to be behind the scenes, see what a set looks like, go in, in the command control and see how the doors, they used to pull a lever to open the doors, and they'd add the whoosh later, but they were literally pulled, manually when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it was super cool. And Michael Piller, next thing I know, he's like, "We're gonna do a feature on a fictional race called the Borg, based on, you know, destructive authoritarian cults." And I was like, "That's really cool. Do it." And then later, over the years, as I met former members, particularly ex Jehovah's Witnesses, who would refer to the watchtower as the Borg, I
Mm-hmm.
would sometimes share that story, that actually that origin story connected from my work, having been in the Moonies and all of that. And so I thought it would be fun to apply the bite model to the Borg,
Yeah.
and maybe we can attract some Trekkies to look at mind control cults, from the frame of the Borg,
Mm-hmm.
and it might give them some tools for reality testing. So, with all that intro, Spike, why don't you take it over
Oh
and
yeah.
share? Tell us more about your interest in Trekkies, and whatever you'd like to say, and then we'll
I
go into
was
the bite model.
I was watching Star Trek literally from the cradle. I mean, my father and I would watch it together, and he had the concordance, and I watched straight up and all and into Next Generation and Voyager. The other series, not so much, but I'm getting more into them now. But I found that in my own explaining to people how cults work, a lot of the time it's good to use a fictional property, a sci fi property, because then you never run up against, well, that's not a cult. How dare you?
Right.
And people can, and also it's fun. Star Trek has billions, well, not billion, but millions of fans worldwide. It's
I
a
would say
big.
hundreds of millions, probably.
Probably, yes. So it's well known, and not just the Borg. You could go through. I once wrote a blog post that was basically talking about my top 10 worlds in the Star Trek series, from the hippie people who fed the giant stone monster Vol
Right.
to that one community that seemed reasonably free, except when they were told, everybody would immediately go into a vaporization chamber when they were told,
Right.
because their government told them to.
Right. And then
And
there's the telepathic people that did Christopher Pike and created the illusions that he was fine. That was another.
mm-hmm,
That was a
mm-hmm.
fave.
Or I am the voice of Landru, which in my opinion was the worst depiction of how cults recruit, but that's another thing.
Uh
However, the
huh.
Borg, yes, XJWs, I've heard it all the time. They call it JW Borg.
Yep.
And
And I can't help but just add, if I may, Spike,
please,
the infamous prankster Q, that I couldn't help but wonder when I first heard about QAnon whether or not they were goofing off of Star Trek Q, because they were goofing on Trump when they started QAnon before it
yeah.
got taken over by the Russians.
Yeah, yeah. I've often thought that too. I even made a meme where Q has his hand around Picard going, "Look, I got drunk on Romulan ale and I just started goofing on this site. I didn't think they would take it seriously. Sorry, Jean-Luc."
Great. So please
Yeah.
continue. So you
S-
grew up with your dad
I
watching Star Trek.
Star Trek all the time, found that it was a really great way to explore society. They talk about all sorts of different things. One particular episode of Voyager discusses medical ethics, which was something I was really into while I was working at a nursing home and had to say, "Up, sorry, you're too poor to live here anymore. You have to leave."
Mm,
And it just really hurt me the way we deal with medicine in this country.
yeah.
But science fiction has always been used as a way to address the evils of our society. And the Borg are a really great example, though they're over the line. Says they have, for those who don't know the Borg, it's not even a race per se, it's a collection of individuals kidnapped violently from all over the galaxy and stripped of their autonomy, stripped of any personal decisions, choice, anything, and equipped with a neural interface. Now, the neural interface is the important thing because as I went down your list, usually when we do the color coded byte models,
Mm-hmm.
you do red for applies to everybody, yellow for applies to some people, and green to say it doesn't really apply.
Mm-hmm.
I found I needed a fourth category, which was gray, that it doesn't apply, but only because of the neural interface and the level of control. And I found as I went through the byte model
Mm-hmm.
that every single one of the ones that fell into that last gray category was things that really have to happen in real life abusive authoritarian groups. Those are their bread and butter. The
Mm-hmm.
withholding of information, the isolating from people, the thought stopping, all of that.
Right.
So,
That's fascinating. So as you were talking, another series of episodes came into my mind when Picard was captured by the Borg and taken over,
mhm,
and,
as
and the
Locutus.
as Locutus, and then he needed to be deprogrammed from the Borg.
Well, that's another thing is that people who know Voyager know that they had an ex Borg. They rescue a Borg from the collective, and her journey from um, drone to human is really a very, very, very good analog for the recovery process of a cult member.
Yeah, they studied cult
They did.
brainwashing,
They
mind
did.
control to while they were making up all of these storylines. And but again, as you said correctly, it may stimulate people to consider, because it's non-threatening, it's not attacking the group that they're in or their direct beliefs or their
Hmm.
identity, but it's over there, and maybe it will turn on some light bulbs for
Mhm.
anyone
Or their
listening to this.
neighbors or their friends. I often come across when I'm talking about JWs. Well, I have a friend who's a JW. It's like, really?
Yeah, but people who are not in the inside loop on
Have no
cults don't
idea.
know what it's
It
really like.
it's like an abusive family.
Mm.
We knew an abusive family in our neighborhood whose daughter basically took refuge at our house.
Mm.
And we knew because we heard from her. But everybody else, oh, he's the most wonderful person. He's a Boy Scout leader. He's this, he's that. He's the most wonderful person in the world.
Right, and
Not.
not.
You don't know until you're actually in it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, tell us what you think we people would appreciate, and we're going to do a blog, and we'll upload your full,
The full one.
filling out of the bite model according to the Borg.
Of course. Well, I actually just grabbed a few of the high points from the
Great,
bite model,
awesome.
and I thought we'd just go through them. Behavior, starting with behavior, regulate an individual's physical reality. That's literally what the Borg does.
Right.
Dictate where, how, whom, and with the member lives or associates. They all live in their little alcoves in this big cube.
Mm.
When, how, and with whom the member has sex, well, they're all apparently celibate. So it controls types of clothing and hairstyles. They all get that black body suit, and they don't say it, but they all get totally depilated um, hair removal. They're all totally bald.
Interesting.
Regulate diet, food, drink, hunger, and fasting. We only find about this in Voyager that if you want to eat, she needs medical help from the ship's doctor to recover her ability to eat.
Hmm.
So they only get their energy through the little energy things in their alcove while they're resting.
So they plug in basically. They're
They
like
plug in.
androids
Yeah, they
of this
don't have,
okay.
yeah, so no food,
Mm-hmm.
manipulation and deprivation of sleep. They don't sleep, they regenerate. They
Mm-hmm.
step into and they stand straight up and they receive, and that's based on not their schedule, it's the Borg schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Then restrict leisure, there is no leisure. Restrict entertainment, there is no entertainment. There is no vacation time. Instill dependency and obedience. When we find Seven of Nine being rescued by Voyager, she is completely dependent. Even in Next Gen, the Borg that they rescue, Hugh, he's totally dependent upon the Borg until Geordi fixes something up.
Mm-hmm.
So they're
That's interesting.
completely,
So we may make some Trekkies out of this episode for people who've
it's
never seen any.
it is fascinating, and I know that in Trekkie circles, Voyager is one of the lesser favorites. It's one of my favorites. I know it's not as well written as some of the others, but
Mm.
I love it
Mm-hmm.
just
Mm-hmm.
because I've always loved Kate Mulgrew. She's an amazing
She was the
actress.
captain, if I
Yeah,
remember
yes,
correctly.
she was the captain, and she's also appeared in episodes of Cheers, Murder She Wrote, and various other things.
Mm-hmm.
So she's just always been this in control, strong woman, and to me that was very important to see growing up.
Mm. By the way, I have another thing popped into my
Oh,
head.
please.
Um, from the original Star Trek, Uhura.
Yes.
Do you remember the name of the
Nichelle
actress?
Nichols.
Yes, thank you. So Nichelle Nichols, I saw a recent interview where she had said she wanted to quit Star Trek after a few years and was told, I think by Martin Luther
Yes.
King, she had an obligation to stay because to show a black female to
Mm-hmm.
millions of people, she was a role model to all black young women. And I believe the original Star Trek was the first time on TV Captain Kirk fell in love with her in one of the episodes or kissed
He
her or
was
something.
being telepathically controlled. It's in Plato's Stepchildren, and actually Bill Shatner, they were going, okay, let's do several takes and maybe we'll use the one with the kiss, and every take that didn't include the kiss, he crossed his eyes or pulled a face so that they had to use that
That's
kiss.
so interesting. But that the point is that that with fiction, it's often moving society culturally
Hmm.
into a very positive direction.
Yeah, they showed that. I mean, Gene Roddenberry's dream was to show a multicultural team of people working together. Though it's not said, I believe that it was that Uhura was actually fifth in command or fourth in command. I forget. She was just below Scotty, I believe, in the command
Yeah,
chain.
she was an officer, and then a
And
small, very sad factoid: her brother died in Heaven's Gate. A lot of people
oh
don't realize
no, I
that it
didn't
was her
know
brother
that.
who was part of the 39 that were
Oy.
told to kill themselves to go up to the spaceship in the so-called Hale-Bopp comet that never showed up. And it was a horrible tragedy.
that is a tragedy. But getting back to Martin Luther King, the quote that I've heard is, "They see you, and in you they see us, and we have never been seen before." And then I've also heard Whoopi Goldberg tell that she actually ran into the kitchen when she first saw it and said, "There's a black lady on TV and she ain't nobody's maid." Because
That's
before then, they had been relegated to servants.
yeah.
And so it was a way for this whole portion of the population to suddenly be seen. I mean,
Yes.
notice that also Daystrom, the guy who literally designed the Enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
was also a black man.
Ah,
I forget the name of the actor, but
yeah.
huge, huge, handsome
You're a
fella.
fountain of Trek knowledge. So
Like I said,
it's fabulous. I love it. I love it. So we did behavior
behave.
control,
Yep. Oh,
which
and
is one of the four components of the BITE
hmm
model of authoritarian
hmm
control.
and to
Proceed.
wrap that, yep, and
Yeah.
to wrap that up, it's kidnapping is in one of the last steps, and the first step of assimilation is an act of violent kidnapping. You're beamed
Yeah.
aboard their ship and put down on a table, and components are put into you.
Yep. So that's what they call assimilating,
Assimilation.
which in the an analog connection to mind control cults, it means recruiting and indoctrinating
hmm
the person to become a true believer.
Exactly.
Mm.
Now, in information control, there's something, and here's where we get into the neural interface taking the place of
Mm-hmm.
a lot of stuff, because there is no deception. The first step, deception and deliberately withholding information. Well, every Borg drone knows everything that every other Borg drone knows. And even the thoughts of the queen, and we'll get into the queen a little bit later on.
So there's no personal private boundaries.
Not at all.
Right.
But also there's no deception. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm a if I'm a if we're drones, both of us drones, light years apart, and I have a thought that I'm working on this panel here, you will somehow know about it.
Sounds a
Light
little
years.
overloading with all of these
Yeah.
Borgians
Well,
everywhere.
the Borgs that have been taken away, usually when Hugh and when 7 and 9 were taken away from the collective, the first thing they say is, "Where are all the voices? I don't hear everybody's voice."
Interesting.
So yeah, it's a bit of overload, but also then encourage spying on every other members. Well, it's not even encouraged. It is.
It is what it is,
It
right?
is what it is, and the collective is. It says impose a buddy system to monitor and control members. Well, if the Borg collective isn't the ultimate buddy system, I don't know what is.
Big brother, right?
Yep, report deviant thoughts, feelings, actions to leadership. When the Borg queen can hear everything everybody's thinking,
Yep.
it's automatic.
Yep.
So that's thought information control. Anything you want to bounce off for that?
Um, I think that there's probably something we can talk about in terms of how people can be liberated from the collective and rescued from being a Borg by cutting the link where
Mm-hmm.
they have some time without the constant flow of information into their
Mm-hmm.
consciousness.
Well, this allows me to float one of my nutty theories about the Great Resignation that happened just after lockdown. Is a
Yeah.
lot is that I feel that a good percentage of the people who decided they did not want to return to work were those who were fleeing toxic work environments.
Mm-hmm.
And the one way that you get out, it was the way I got out of my cult, is the way you got out, was from being taken away from that group, taken away out of that bubble,
Yeah.
and given a chance to decompress.
Yeah, totally. And I would add that I've talked to many people because of the COVID lockdowns, didn't go to their churches or their meetings. That gave them the space
Mm-hmm.
to start thinking and deviating a little bit by looking on critical sites and
Mm-hmm.
seeing what ex-members have to say online. And all of a sudden, whoa, the collective lied to us about our history of our organization.
Mm-hmm.
And
I heard from one ex-JW that he changed countries and he started going to meetings in a language that he did not speak so well, which afforded him a chance to be separate from that.
yeah, well, Amber Scorer was a JW. She was in China. And being in China, explaining English and how the Westerners do business, that allowed her
Mm-hmm.
some, because she wasn't allowed to recruit by the Chinese government.
Mm-hmm.
So she
Mm-hmm.
had to like stop, because that's part of the in continual indoctrination, is if you're proselytizing and recruiting others, it keeps you in the loop. But if you're not
Mm-hmm.
allowed to keep telling your beliefs and recruiting new people, that creates some space too that can be very positive.
I've always said if you think that things are a bit too hard, a bit too much, or you have any doubt whatsoever, just take a short vacation. If it's an okay group, you can always go back.
Mm.
If it's not an okay group, you'll realize it after a few weeks
Yeah, and I
away.
think the key is at least a week is my recommendation,
Mhm,
and turn off your cell phones. Don't allow the group to continually message you and monitor your location
mhm,
and do all the rituals. Take a
mhm.
real break from
And if they're
everything.
not okay with you leaving, then there's your answer right there.
It's so true. Any legitimate organization will give you at least a couple of weeks off a year, if not more.
Hmm.
The Europeans think the Americans are crazy for working so hard.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, for various
So,
reasons.
yep, and thought control.
Thought control.
So,
Okay, one of the ones that I thought was interesting was unethical use of confession. Well, here's one where the Borg actually scores green. Confession is irrelevant, sin is irrelevant. The collective just doesn't care who you were or what you did, saint, sinner, or sideways. They don't care who you were before you were a Borg.
yeah, because
So there's no
they
confession.
reprogrammed you.
Yeah, there's no confession. So
Hmm.
information's about sins used to disrupt and dissolve. There's no identity boundaries anyway to be dissolved.
Right,
So sin doesn't matter. Withholding forgiveness and absolution, there's no forgiveness or absolution. You're not even a member, you're a tool, you're a piece of technology.
right.
Then manipulation of memory. This is one where yeah, you just basically forget. There's one episode where Seven of Nine and a bunch of other Borgs in her flashback crash land and are temporarily taken away from the Borg. And the first thing they do is they start sharing memories. And that is uneth-
Verboten,
yeah, that's forbidden. Nope, you can't do that. Unauthorized was the word I was
unauthorized. Yeah.
unauthorized. Then change the person's name and identity. Well, 7 and 9 was Annika Hansen. She never uses that name again. Even when survives, she's always 7 or 7 of 9.
Mm-hmm.
Temporary adjunct of Unimatrix 001. Somebody will get me in the comments.
I think this is going to be fun to see the public's reaction and response, and maybe
Hmm.
we can, you know, reach out to some of the big shots who are involved with
I'd
Star Trek and get their
love
feedback. That would be
I'd love
fun.
to hear some of them.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Encourage only good and proper thoughts. This is one of the gray ones again, where only good and proper thoughts. There's no good proper thoughts. There's no bad thoughts. There's no thoughts whatsoever. There's only the thoughts that are given to you via the new neural interface.
Mm-hmm.
So take
Mm-hmm.
that interface away. That's where your average group needs thought stopping. They
Right.
need to stop your thoughts.
Makes sense.
Forbid critical questions about leader, doctrine, or policy. Well, there's no questions because questions require actual thought.
Yeah, independence.
So that's your thought control right there, and that's I think the biggest one.
But I would add loaded language. There's a lot of loaded language, the collective, and, there's a whole
And
bunch of words.
drones, and yes, and everything is irrelevant.
Hmm. And what's the statement about resistance is
Resistant
futile?
is futile.
That's loaded language.
That's loaded language.
Resistance is futile. You
But they're not
resistance.
even they're using a computer language to communicate via the neural interface,
Right.
so that it's not even the queen has a thought, boom, a Borg 2000 light years pulls a switch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's it.
And
Now
so there's no king, right? It's just the queen.
just a queen. Now, do you want to talk about the queen or wait till after emotional control?
Yeah, let's finish up the bite model and
Yeah,
then we'll.
let's finish it up because the queen is her own problematic thing in herself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, emotional control. Teach emotion stopping techniques to block feelings of homesickness, anger, and doubt. Again, the neural interface takes care of this. Though this is something that in real life, in a real authoritarian, destructive group, they're going to have to tend to. That's going to
Mm-hmm.
be their bed and butter.
Mm-hmm.
Bread and butter.
Yep.
Then also, the neural interface blocks all feelings and emotions, including the instilling of fear, thinking independently, fear of the outside world, fear of enemies. There is no fear. A drone does not experience any fear, it does not experience any phobias.
So it doesn't experience emotions, really.
Yeah, they don't experience any of it. So there's no there's no induction of phobias here.
So if I was going to just surmise, it's the neural interface that does all of the information control that dictates
hmm
everything else.
All the information control, all the thought control, and all the emotional control is handled by the neural interface. So in a real world group, those are the ones that are really having to be pulled.
Got it. Good.
So,
So BITE and yeah, so do we want to talk about the queen? Because I'm wondering if she's a malignant narcissist or if there's any parallels to
oh yes,
cult leadership.
she is grandiose, she is paranoid. Um be, now, first of all, I've got to say, those who are not in various fandoms will not necessarily know what the word retcon means.
Mm-hmm.
It means a retroactive conversion, or I forget what cons means, but retcon is when, if you're writing a series or anything that goes in a series, a whole bunch of things, a whole expanded universe, as it were, and in a later point in the series you write in something that's such an important plot point that it affects earlier installations. Well, why didn't they say that was true?
Mm-hmm.
That's a retcon,
Mm-hmm.
where you're retroactively writing in stuff that wasn't there in the original. The Borg was originally had no leader. That's why they were so frightening. There was no central authority. There was nobody in charge. It was
Mm-hmm.
just this whole race. That
Right.
was it. Then she was written into the movie First Contact and then consequently used in Voyager.
Uh-huh.
She is narcissistic, going on your influence continuum model
Yeah.
now. She is narcissistic and possibly psychopathic,
Mm-hmm.
elitist, And I would say a little bit grandiose. I said, but not grandiose in my thing, but I'm going to take that back. I think she is grandiose. She's definitely power hungry. She has power over all the drones.
Right. And she wants
And
to recruit more people, I assume, right?
yeah, and the goal is perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And their idea of perfection is that everybody is a drone.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody. What is the line? Your distinctiveness will add to ours.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes she's secretive and deceptive to outsiders, but all Borg drones know everything she does. This has been used against her
Mm.
in certain episodes. In fact, I think it was in the series finale that it was actually used against her.
And so say a few more words because I'm curious. How could this all-powerful being of these billions of, were there billions of Borgs or
Billions
millions?
of Borgs.
Billions of Borg. Yeah.
Because when she knows something, it's transmitted, and at the time, Janeway is plugged into the collective, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so she automatically knows and can shut something off.
Uh-huh.
So she's able to use that. There's also something called, and somebody's going to bring it up, so I might as well, Unimatrix Zero. There's an episode in Voyager where we find out that certain Borg have a glitch in their system that means that when they regenerate, they go into this unimatrix that's like, it looks like a sandals resort. it's
No
the
plug here.
it's a Bahamian beach
Yeah.
where everybody can just relax and talk and be themselves as they were before they were assimilated.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then when they wake up, they have no memory of what they do.
Mm.
So, and
Interesting.
that's weeded out because that's a horrible, horrible thing for them to have this respite.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and Annika Hansen slash Seven of Nine is one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I believe that's also another one where they use the Queen's weakness of what every Borg drone sees goes back to the Queen to fool her, and also use it as, oh, we're being able to find out that she's doing this because she starts self-destructing ships across the galaxy.
Right. Right. So you are a Trekkie.
I I am. Um
You are the most knowledgeable Trekkie I've ever met.
oh, I am not. I'm not even
Well,
compared to some others.
well, there may be people who know more, but I'm just saying in terms of
Well, thank you.
my friend group, you definitely merit the highest awards and
Well,
acclaim
thank
on
you.
that. And I hope it's okay to say this, but you've heard me say over and over again on the influence continuum, I believe there are cults from the ethical, benign,
Mhm.
productive, all the way to the destructive one. May I deign to suggest people who are Trekkies might be a cult of,
Have you ever watched the movies Trekkies and 1 and Trekkies 2?
no, I have
By
not.
Roger Nygaard. It's basic, and yes, I would say they are a benevolent group because
Yeah.
there are people that it's their entire lifestyle, but they do good. There's like Klingon commands. There's that woman who went to jury duty in the Clinton trial in her Starfleet regalia.
I didn't hear about that. That's
Oh
fun.
yeah, yeah, they interview her. Um, it is, yes,
I
as
think
far
there's
as,
somebody who created a Klingon language
oh
and they
yeah, actually, James Doohan, who played Scotty in the
hmm
original series, was one of the people who started that,
uh-huh.
and others have added to it.
Yeah,
Uh,
so dressing up,
going to conventions.
going to conventions, parties, watching parties, analyzing plot lines of episodes.
wearing property of Starfleet University
Oh
t-shirts.
my goodness, I just noticed it. Silly me, property of Starfleet.
I actually bought this for this interview.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, so Starfleet, for those who aren't Trekkies, that's the benevolent, westernized, Trek, entity that goes out to discover the new worlds.
There are some people who like to espouse the fan theory that Starfleet is not actually a benevolent organization, and we're just seeing their propaganda a la Ship Troopers.
Yeah, so and that gets into my psyops theory that if whatever people are really into can be infiltrated and people
And
can be made
yes,
to question it and have uncertainty and
hmm
confusion, which is sad.
but I would say that Trekkies, for yes, they are a benevolent cult,
Mm-hmm.
and they're a perfect example because you can leave.
Yeah.
A family member cannot believe. In Trekkies too, there's one where the mother and one of her daughters are totally into it, wear the uniforms all the time, and another daughter not so much,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't shun her.
Right.
She's still part of the family.
Right. Yeah, you don't
Then
want to
there's
put
that
other
dentist that
people.
requires all of his hygienists to wear Starfleet uniforms.
I didn't know about that. Is that true?
Yeah, though actually it's gentle pressure. They don't have to, but they end up because
Sounds like a marketing ploy to get a
it
lot
is.
of
It's called
kids.
Starfleet Dental. I think they're in California. Where else?
That's so funny. That's incredible.
Where else? I did. Oh, there was for organizations the your for organizations
Right?
bit of the continuum.
Yep.
So egalitarianism versus elitism. Before the Queen, the Borg were completely egalitarian, but still very destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Checks and balances versus authoritarian structure. All the drones are in a collective structure. There's small functional hierarchies, but besides the Queen, no drone is superior to any other drone.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
have numbers like one, two, three, and four, and they try to. There's one episode where a bunch of kids try to create some sort of hierarchy, but they aren't getting it right because they've been temporarily taken away from the Borg
Mm-hmm.
as well. Individual diversity versus clones. People, the drones are all clones.
Clones. Yep.
They're all the same. They all think the same. Means create end versus end justifies means. Their end is justifying all the kidnap, all the torture, all the murder, all the assimilation is for their goal of perfection.
Yeah, and they want to grow outward and
hmm
assimilate everybody into their model of
Everybody.
reality.
hmm And encourages growth versus preserves own power. The only growth is the growth of the Borg drone population.
Right.
And then free to leave versus no legitimate reason to leave. Well, you're not free to leave. You can't even physically unless helped.
Right. So fascinating. Can we go back for a minute to Picard getting captured and
Sure,
recruited?
sure.
And you reminded me that they called him Locutus. And
Which
that
means
speaks to the
voice.
dual identity model that I teach about the
hmm
dissociative disorder of mind control. There was, Jean-Luc Picard and Locutus,
Locutus of Borg.
and tell me what you remember of how they get him out of the Borg mentality. How was he rescued?
Oh, that's basically they shut down and make all of the Borg regenerate. Data forms a neural link through the neural interface with Jean Luc,
Mm-hmm.
plugs him in, and then through Jean-Luc, this is another one of that weakness of the what the Borg all know, what one Borg knows all the others know.
Yep.
He basically can, because he's in contact with one Borg, make them all go to sleep. He
Hmm.
sends the command, time to regenerate, to the entire collective, or
And
at
it,
least to
it
that one
buys
cube.
time for Data to rescue him?
Yeah, because once he's detached, he's suddenly Jean-Luc again. And because he was only in the collective for what, a week? Week and a
Uh-huh.
half?
So Data neutralizes the mechanical neural
Mhm.
link, and so his real self surfaces.
Yeah, and they say, "How do you feel?" Almost human.
Uh-huh. And my recollection, it's been years since I've seen it, was that he still had recovery issues as Jean-Luc after
Oh,
the fact.
yes.
So
Yes,
let's
there's
talk about the fact that when people exit an authoritarian cult, they also need a recovery period to
mhm.
figure, reassert their identity and who they are and reclaim their memories and all that good stuff.
Well, because it was Jean-Luc Picard, it was only one episode. He's
Right.
got what I call plot armor.
Yes, plot armor. That's cute. That
Well, it's
clever.
not just my phrase. That's
Yeah.
another fandom thing. That's why the troopers in Star Wars have such bad aim when they're shooting at Luke, because Luke has plot armor. He's a main character. He can't get you.
Right. That's so interesting.
But for Jean-Luc, yeah, he goes home and he has the most horrible time going home and reconnects with his family with whom he already had a problematic relationship, we find.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he has to talk about, I was being forced to do horrible things. I remember I didn't do physically horrible things in my own group. We did things by imagining that we were doing them,
Mm-hmm.
so that we were taught to send out bad energy to
Oh yeah,
people.
to curse people, etc.
Hmm.
Yeah, but it's very common. I felt like I had done things that were antithetical to my identity and my values that I regretted for sure.
I bit somebody's nose once to establish control. Not very
Wow.
hard, but enough to make him yelp.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
an interesting story. Maybe
yeah,
another time we'll
yeah,
get it
yeah. I
we'll
mean,
get
I'm.
into that. But that brings up another point I want to highlight with our population. We're both former members.
Mhm.
Um, that it can happen to really smart people who are accomplished and educated.
Oh
You
yeah,
have a
isn't
master's degree and I have two masters and Jean-Luc was a Starfleet captain and it happened to him.
wasn't Rajneesh's cult sometimes called the PhD cult because they recruited so extensively amongst very educated people?
Yeah, I think the average level of education in at least the American branch of the Rajneeshis that was out in Antelope, Oregon. There was a docu-series called Wild Wild Country about that. I think the average was master's level
Yeah,
in that group. And Leo Ryan, another factoid, the congressman who was part of the Koreagate investigation that I was a whistleblower for, who was assassinated by Jim Jones during the People's Temple massacre in Guyana. His daughter got recruited into Rajneesh, and they paraded her around saying, you know, even though my father was killed by a cult, we're not a cult because
yeah,
I'm too smart.
because what is the phrase? There's before cult membership and there's after cult membership, but you're not in a cult while you're during the cult membership.
Well, I wasn't in a cult when I was a
No,
Moonie.
my leader even said that once. He said, "We're not a cult. We're a
Right,
ritual magic order."
right. Yeah. And again, and I should add that I'm accused of being in the cult of Soros and that I've been brainwashed.
Yeah.
So the terminology in the psyops information warfare environment we're living in right now can be confusing. But my hope is that the work here at Freedom of Mind um, can clearly identify the variables that people can look at: behavior control, information, thought, and emotional control,
Hmm.
and reality test when you're not connected to the collective. I mean, unplug your cell phone, stop doing all the cult ritual, the group rituals and whatever, and study brainwashing techniques, Lifton, Singer, Shine, my bite model. Seek out critics and former members and really be with an open mind. Listen to why they left and what their criticisms are, and reflect on your own direct experience. And with the knowledge of the bite model, the knowledge of what the critics and former members say, ask yourself to go back in time before you got involved. If I knew this stuff back then, would I have ever gotten involved in the first place? And if the answer is no, then that's your answer. Time to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Plan an exit
Hmm.
strategy.
I will say that one of the things that drew me into my group was, well, it wasn't a group. Basically, it was one guy, and then the group collected around us.
Sure.
So but it was because I wanted to change the world for the better.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
always this high thing, JWs. It's, well, don't you want to study the Bible? Don't you want to make things better?
Yeah. Or
You
follow
don't you want to
God,
do
you know.
world peace for yours? I mean, what do they call themselves these days? Federation for
The
World
Family
Peace.
Federation for World
World
Peace and
Peace.
Unification. They don't call themselves the Unification Church anymore. The
Yeah,
media
because of
does.
branding. Because of
But
branding.
people do get recruited to the idea that they're going to have personal improvement. They're going to be
Hmm.
more effective, successful, more powerful, be a
Hmm.
better person, or we're going to change the world. We're going to save the world. We're going to help all the poor
Hmm.
and the starving children. We're going to end war, or if it's a fully religious cult, it's we're God and everyone else is Satan, and
Yeah,
we have to
yeah.
save everybody.
Or you get to live this fabulous life for your commercial MLM cults. There's always a golden apple
Yeah, yeah,
being
the
dangled.
fantasy of the ideal world, or where you become a
Hmm.
multimillionaire and never need to work again,
Yeah, yeah.
or levitate objects with your mind, as they promise
Or
in Scientology.
levitate yourself by hopping up and down on your coccyx.
Yes, that's the Transcendental Meditation cult, TM cult. So, as we're wrapping up, Spike, this has been fun
This
and
has been.
stimulating. Any last thoughts you want to leave with our listeners?
I would like to invite any other Trekkies to perhaps take a look at another fictional race, another, and do a bite model on Landru's world, or on the world where they visit Next Gen, where everybody's an androgynous person and it's a sin to identify
Hmm.
as one gender or another.
Hmm.
Take an episode and send do the bite model on it, and even the influence continuum on it, and send it in. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, and I would just add, we're really trying to create a movement of former members to destigmatize the fact that intelligent,
Hmm.
educated people can be lured into the authoritarian
Hmm.
relationships and groups, and that there's life after group.
Hashtag
So
I got out.
hashtag I got out, which I was, involved at the very
Hmm.
founding of that movement, kind of wanting to tap into the Me Too energy. Yep, it happened to me too, but I got
Ah,
out.
yeah.
And yeah, if you're on social media, follow us and subscribe to our newsletter that you put out every Tuesday, Spike. Thanks to you.
It's my
And
pleasure.
check out our blog and educate people. We have now
Hmm.
downloadable bite models that you can print out, put on your wall. We're going to be actually making some T-shirts and other fun
Hmm.
things to just create more awareness
Exactly.
and
Well,
more
that's the thing.
conversations.
When I got out in 1997, and the only help was your book, Margaret Singer's book, and a couple other. And the therapist I went to knew nothing.
Right.
And I thought, this is crazy.
Right.
This can't happen on my watch.
And thanks to you and so many others, you have decided to invest a lot of time and energy to help educate others. And
Oh,
you
yeah.
reminded me that we have online courses now for therapists
Mm-hmm.
as well as for former members to learn
Yeah.
more in depth about these important foundational ideas and models.
Yeah. Yeah. Because to me, it's unconscionable that somebody could go through all of this and then go to a therapist and the therapist goes, I don't know how to handle this. It should be offered to every therapist.
Yeah, I mean, if you are a former member and you're frustrated that your therapist, you're spending your time educating your therapist,
Mm-hmm.
demand that the therapist spend some time and energy and effort to learn so they can do ethical
Mm-hmm.
therapy with you or find a different therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And talk to the media because the media has not been explaining undue influence at
No, they
all.
haven't. They like to put up these pictures of victims,
Yep.
and then you see in the comments, well, I would never get into that because they don't explain how it's done. They just show the filthy aftermath.
Yeah, and it's really irresponsible journalism, in our opinion, that they're not taking the opportunity to get help the public to
Hmm.
understand the nuts and bolts of how this thing
Exactly.
operates.
Exactly.
So thank you, thank you, thank you, and this is fun, and let's help educate so many more people about the reality of authoritarian mind control groups
Yes.
and cults. So thank you
Yes.
so much.
And thank you.
Steve Hassan here. You know, it's been decades since my family rescued me from the Moonies. I've been at this for over 47 years. The need has never been greater. If you're able, please consider hitting the super thanks button below, and it'll help us to do better. Every penny will help us toward our goal of educating the planet about undue influence. Remember, it's your mind, only you should control it.